What happened next, after nearly being murdered to death, was so intense that I had to jump on a jet. And I flew around the world for a while. It's like when a meteorite comes to Earth, it shatters into many pieces. And that's exactly what my soul felt like. It felt like it had been fragmented. And I knew deep within that I had to go and collect it. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. What happened next was such a strange series of coincidences and seemingly random occurrences that it's enough to boggle the mind, or enough to make you flip your lid. I mean, I ended up in Canada, and in Canada I met a girl who lived around the corner from where I came from and was the female equivalent of me. Exactly the same. Although she didn't realize how broken she was. I mean, from talking to her, I found out that she'd never been hugged as a child growing up. Can you imagine what that was like? Like growing up in a family where there are no hugs. How are you, do you know what I mean? It's mind-boggling. But one of the things I noticed about her is when she smiled, her left eye didn't open as much as her right. And that's very interesting, because I'd long suspected that our eyes beam out energy, which is why you can feel yourself. You know, when you're in a club and someone's looking at you, you turn around and look at exactly who's staring, and you know that they're doing it. And that's what got me thinking, because my eyes used to do the same until I'd started looking within and processing the turmoil, trauma and emotion of my life. And that was really interesting. But what happened next was suddenly I met another girl from Australia who was an inversion of this one. And then there was another one from Vancouver, another one. They were from all over the place, New York, LA. There was just so many of them. And yet it was like I was talking to one woman that was expressing as many different women. And it was blowing my mind, the interactions that I was going through. But then I started to see it, that it was like a dance. And it was like they had a piece of me. I don't know how, why these ones in particular were picked to have my soul fragments, but I know that they had them, and I know that I had to interact with them in a certain way to get them back. And eventually I came back to the UK, and I'm here, and things now went into hyperdrive. It was like I was meeting a woman who was like an exact clone of one I knew before, like down to the way that she walked, she talked, the way she smelled, every single thing was identical. Her passions, what she did, how she went about doing it, everything was identical. And then there was another one who could have been a sister, who probably was a sister but denied that she was, but I have a sneaky suspicion that she was. And it was all of this, some of them were obviously in on the act, and these I call twinkle twinkles because they're little stars. And it was really interesting, but it all culminated. The last fragment I had to get back because I could feel it as I was interacting with them. It was like a dance, and I could feel that I'm getting me back. I could feel the ones where I lost it, and I was losing more of myself, and I was feeling more fragmented and more broken. And then there were ones where I was, because you learn from that. You never lose if you learn the lesson, because then you're winning in experience. And I learned how this was working, and I thought, well, okay, if this is what it is, this is what I've got to do to get back to who I am, to regain my integrity, to regain my experience. At the end of the day, I'm not dead, but I wouldn't say I was fully living either. But then on the flip, one thing I realized is people are traumatized. People are like broken beyond belief. It was something I'd suspected, but at this moment my empathy was running so high that I call it feel-see, where I could like go into someone else's body and feel their sensations, feel their pain. It was like if I'm talking to you and you had a sore throat, I could feel it. Do you know what I mean? It was very bizarre. It was like my personal boundaries were like non-existent at this moment. And apparently this is how a child is. When a child is born, their sense of self extends out into everyone and everything. They literally are the whole world. And I thought this was an interesting parallel, because it does feel like during this time I rebirthed myself. Anyway, so I met this girl, and this girl was like a complete mess, and I knew straight away she is the embodiment of my shame, because this is what I'd come to realize during my processing, that because all of this, because every single thing takes place inside your awareness, you never truly actually interact with the person who is standing in front of you. Instead, you're interacting with projections that come out of you. So you can have somebody who is an embodiment of your anger, and they will, of course, make you angry until you deal with the anger inside, and then another facet of them is revealed. This is how people's personalities can appear to shift, right? This is also something very interesting when it comes to like alcohol and the way alcohol processes this, because there are tension patterns inside our body that limit the expression of our personalities. And what we don't like in ourselves, we often project onto another. And when we meet someone who's exactly the same as us, like I did with that woman, you are instantly repulsed by them because you see all of your flaws made manifest in front of you. All of your coping mechanisms are there. Anyway, so with this girl, she was a straight up mess. Do you know what I mean? She was like a ball of insecurity, self-loathing, hatred, with a false sheen of confidence over the top. And I felt an immense sense of empathy, but then on the other hand, I also knew she was there to try and kill what was left of me. And it was a strange dance. It was very, very strange, and it went on for quite a while. And I was trying to observe, like what the levels and the rules of the game are. And I knew what was at stake here, because it was my wholeness. I knew that if I didn't play this hand correctly, I'd lose. And one of the most interesting things that started happening during all of this was the sheer amounts of coincidences where I'd happen to go somewhere and she'd be there, or I'd bump into her, and it was just happening like again and again and again. And these were what I call TV moments. Now, TV moments is something we're going to get into in another time, but it's something about the game of souls and this reality show in outer space. They've got to make it interesting for the audience. And I knew I had to save her and save myself at the same time, if that makes any sense, because I had a dream in which she killed herself. And, well, she almost killed herself, because in the dream I walked into a building and she was hanging from a rope, and I pulled her down off the rope, and as I pulled her down I noticed she had some tattoos on her chest which I'd never seen before. And then, it happens the next day I go and I bump into her and asked her, I said, "What's the deal with these tattoos?" And she lifts up her shirt and says, "Here they are." And I was stunned, because it was exactly what I'd seen. And I thought, hang on a second, how messed up is this girl's head? And what am I seeing? Are my dreams being manipulated? Because it was around this time I thought, the nature of dreams is not what you think. And we're going to cover this when we get into what it means to have a good night's sleep and why it's so vital to the day that comes. Because it's like a spiritual experience, right? You have to comprehend, why would nature knock you out for like a third of the day, right? Just leave you completely immobile at the mercy of the elements. We didn't always live in houses with flat screen TVs, so it makes no sense. But what it is 9/10 of your spirit is removed and then it comes back in again. That's the reason why that, people have that falling dream. That's what that means. That's the return of your energies coming back. Now, you do tend to, like I said, I was absorbing a ridiculous quantity of energy from people that were all around me, because there were chunks of my aura that were missing. There were pieces of my soul that were out in the world that I had to regain. It's like when emotional trauma and pain hits you, it's like an atom bomb going off inside you, and everything scatters because your spirit is threatened with destruction. So it tries to save itself, but in the process of saving itself in fragments, I don't know if it was intended for me to come back from what I'd witnessed, or if that was supposed to be the end, but I'm here now telling you this, so it is what it is. Now, I sat down and thought, this girl's going to kill herself. Do you know what I mean? I thought, I can't have that. You know what I mean? That would be like the second time that's happened, and the first time was no good, and it reminded me of that experience as well. It was just so bizarre. And I could see that she was freaking out, do you know what I mean? That she was like trying to put like a veneer on, how like a duck is when a duck's floating around and it pretends to be calm, but underneath the surface it's flapping away like crazy. And I thought, she really might kill herself, you know what I mean? What am I going to do? So I'm talking to her and she's like, "Oh, yeah, that's it. I'm going. I'm not having any more of this." And I thought, man, in my mind, I'm interpreting this as, this is what you dreamt. Do you know what I mean? So I'm sitting there thinking, all right, look, man, how do I communicate with her? Because I realized with the earlier soul fragments that I'd regained, it all comes down to communication. Because communication, everything in this world is exchange of energy. There's emotional energy, sexual energy, spiritual energy. It's all different types of energy. And I knew that when I was speaking to her, I was speaking to a fragment of myself. I was speaking to the embodiment of my shame. And how do you make your shame? How do you make your shame feel welcome if your shame has run away? What do? How do you get it back? Do you know what I mean? It feels ashamed. It feels like it's been ostracized. You can see why, for a part of you like that, suicide would be an option, because it thinks that life is not worth living. So I did the only thing that came to mind. I turned around and said that we should be together. And it was like a Rolodex of emotions were flipping through her face, and I could feel myself like, you know what I mean? It was like, I'm back. I'm reintegrated. And it felt fantastic. Do you know what I mean? It was absolutely awesome. And I thought, cool. Now, long story short, long story longer, the girl didn't kill herself, do you know what I mean? And I'm still here telling you this. But it was a very, very interesting experience which generated a whole load of insight. But that entire period, it took such a long time for me to be able to actually figure this out, because there's no school for this. You know what I mean? You've got to figure this out as you're going along. You've got to pick up the pieces and put them together. Otherwise, it makes no sense. And it really made me wonder how many people have fell in this ditch and then starved to death because they didn't know how to get themselves out, because nobody speaks about it. I can't be the only person in the world that this has happened to. Do you know what I mean? Right? Obviously, I don't think as many people had it as happen as dramatically as mine, but it is what it is. Some of us have a flair, some of us don't. But that's why I want to share it with you, because I haven't told anyone about this. And I'm standing here now speaking to a camera, telling the entire world. I'm literally laying my soul bare because it feels so good to have it back. And the tools that I use to get it back, that's what I want to share with you. That's what I intend to give you. But now we're getting closer. We're getting closer to starting what I call an insight into the game of souls, because I want to show you how I got to the point where I'm at. You know what I mean? Because if I just turned around and started telling you the things that I know and the things that I've seen, how we came to be, what the true nature of reality is, and all these things, it would be, guess what, who is this guy? You know what I mean? Where did he get this knowledge from? What makes me think he's not just making it up? But that's why I need to show you this. Do you know what I mean? I need to show you my raw, natural, real emotion, what I've seen, what I've been, in order so you can perceive through these eyes and feel in your chest, because the experience of empathy that brings, I know that you too can feel it, but most people, they're dead from the neck down, right? They're living in their heads and they're believing these messages and images that they get. I mean, that was one of the things with this girl. She had crazy inner dialogue. The amount of self-hatred and loathing that was going on in there, I was like, oh man, do you know what I mean? How can people live like this? It was one of them things I saw again and again, because the greatest taboo in modern life is telepathy, right? They really, really want you to think that's a whole load of crap and it doesn't really exist. But every single one of us has had at one point in their life information pour in that they've got no logical reason for having, but they know, they can feel it in their bones. Do you know what I mean? Like, you might think of someone you haven't seen for a long time and then you bump into them in the market, or like I said, the sense of being stared at. This was actually well studied, because it was something I was looking into previously, because pets generally are more attuned with this. One of the interesting things actually that's just reminded me about all of these women was they had really significant dates of birth. Do you know what I mean? They were terrorist attacks, tsunamis, all this kind of madness, or repeating numbers. So there was always some kind of significance to the dates of birth as well, which does tie in dramatically with this, because it's about frequency and it's about resonance. You've noticed this, you've been on holiday before, sometimes some people have a yearning in their soul which says, I want to go to such and such place on holiday. And then when they go there, you feel at home, you feel at ease, you feel like a completion. That is what I mean about soul fragments. I do think that everyone's had that when they come to Earth. I think pieces of us break off and they're waiting for us to go and collect them. And then when we come home, we feel whole, we feel different, we feel recharged in a way. Now, if you stop and think, look at the nature of the Game of Souls, where they give you these passports and they give you borders and they give you boundaries and these invisible lines, you know what I mean, drawn in the sand saying you can't go here and you can't go there, or it costs you this much to go here. What a great way that is to suppress the people and prevent them from gaining their own power. Because if we were free to roam, as I discovered, I was going here and I was going there, I was going to all these different countries, and after each one I was feeling stronger. After each interaction I was getting a piece of me back, right? Until I get to where I am now. And where I am now made me realize that before all of this went down, before I was nearly murdered to death, I was actually already halfway dead. This is something I call death percent. And we're going to get into, because it's a simple question of how alive do you feel? And the truth of the matter is, most people don't feel alive. That's why they need to get high, they need distractions, do you know what I mean? They need all this other crap that life is more than happy to provide, because the last thing this world wants you to do is turn your attention within, right? Within all of us, there is still a child. I can prove it to you so simply. All you got to do is go and pick up a pen and use your non-dominant hand and start writing something. And you'll notice your writing looks exactly the same as it did when you were a little child, right? This part of us, this big part of us, is adulterated, hence adult. They don't even try and hide it. It's right there in front of your face. If something has been adulterated, it is not pure, right? What I discovered is the thing that kept me alive, the thing that gave me strength, is pure, is always pure, but I'd spent my whole life trying to ignore it and burying it with the pain of experience, and that was my inner child. The thing is as my soul fragments blew to the four corners of the earth, the only thing that was left was my inner child. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for what happened, because it allowed me to reconnect. And that is something I wish to gift to everybody. Hopefully, your example won't be as dangerous as mine was, because who knows how that could have gone. Obviously, I was powerfully protected and am powerfully protected to be able to stand here and say this now as we speak. But it's mind-blowing, the implications of experience, right? And you are taking it secondhand because you haven't felt it, you haven't seen it, you haven't been it. I do hope that you can experience my authenticity and it translates energetically, because this is all about sincerity. If I can help one person, do you know what I mean? If there is one person right now who is in a similar situation, who has experienced tragedy, who's experienced pain, who can't make sense of it, who doesn't have the insight, who doesn't have that silence within to be able to let the inner child speak, then I speak for it and allow you to reconnect to yourself. Because that's the only thing that's worth having in this realm, do you know what I mean? You can buy things, you can get all the shiny toys and all the accessories that you want in this world, but if you, at your basis, do not fundamentally like yourself, if that little voice in your head continually tells you bad things, right? If even when you do get something nice, you know you're going to mess it up because you're your own worst enemy, then really, what is the point in living? You can't say that you're living, you're existing or subsisting, to be more accurate. And it's a tragedy. But the thing is nobody speaks about it, especially in this social media age where everyone wants to put on like the glitz and the glamour and make it seem like they're so perfect. You know what I mean? They give you this like popping champagne bottles in the club image, even though they're sitting in the house eating cold tins of beans with the lights out because they can't afford to pay the bills. They don't show you that. They don't show you that. Me, I'm going to show you the whole nine. I'll give you everything, right? I've got nothing to hide. Do you know why people lie? People lie because they have a lack of confidence and they're scared of what the other person might say. Take it all the way back to being a child. Realistically, this always goes back to being a child. The events that happened between 0 and 8, right? And then in limited increments, but similar levels of impact between 8 and 21, that's it. Most people are set in them and they repeat the same patterns again and again and again. We're going to get into that when I talk about the skinny guy who liked fat girls, because he was the one that first made me realize this pattern, because he didn't realize it and people don't realize it. They keep doing this pattern again and again and again. But once you be where I've been and you diffuse these patterns, once you heal the pain, once you reconnect with your inner child, then it's a whole new state of play. And the Game of Souls doesn't like that, because the Game of Souls is aware. If you are connected to your inner child, you have power. You don't need the game. You are the game, and you're here to play. If, on the other hand, you're disconnected from your inner child, and you're living entirely in your head, being held hostage by this voice which is telling you, unsavory nothings, then that's it. You're a victim. And like I said, the only difference between victim and victor, it isn't where you start, it's how you end. And I'm still rolling in this adventure, and I intend to bring you in. So come along for the ride till we meet again.